Have you ever wondered why life pulled you away from everything and everyone? Why the universe seemed to silence the world around you? It wasn't random. That period of isolation you walked through was a spiritual strategy, a sacred intervention. And Carl Jung, the legendary depth psychologist, understood exactly why it had to happen. What if I told you that your solitude wasn't a sign of weakness, but of awakening? That the loneliness you felt wasn't a void, but a threshold, the doorway to becoming your most authentic, integrated self. In this video, you'll discover the forgotten insight Jung left behind, why your soul orchestrated your withdrawal, how your shadow chose solitude, and what ancient archetypes say about your sacred aloneness. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're being reshaped by a higher intelligence, an intelligence that speaks in silence and transforms through stillness. This is not just psychology. This is spiritual alchemy. And when you understand what's really happening, you'll never fear your isolation again. There comes a moment in nearly every spiritual seeker's journey when the noise of the world becomes intolerable. Not in a dramatic, theatrical sense, but in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. Conversations feel hollow. Crowds feel heavy. Even familiar relationships begin to vibrate at a frequency that no longer fits. That's when it happens, the call to withdraw. Not by choice, but by soul design. Carl Jung understood this as the psyche's instinctive preparation for something sacred, transformation. This isn't depression. It isn't antisocial behavior. It's a deeper law of nature, the same law that causes a snake to shed its skin in seclusion, or a caterpillar to cocoon in utter stillness. The transformation of identity requires the dissolution of everything false, and that process is far too delicate to occur in the open. Isolation, then, is not punishment. It is preparation, a sacred pause orchestrated by your higher consciousness to cleanse, recalibrate, and remember who you really are. Jung often spoke of the need to pull back from the collective in order to reclaim one's individuality. He knew that conformity, even the well-meaning kind, acts like psychic glue. It keeps you stuck to old versions of yourself. So when you begin to awaken, your psyche naturally resists that glue. It seeks frictionless space, silence, solitude. In truth, your isolation isn't a retreat. It's an initiation. In these quiet spaces, old wounds rise to the surface. Uncomfortable memories, dormant emotions, forgotten dreams, they all begin to swirl. This is not a sign something's wrong. It's a sign everything is being revealed for healing. Without external distractions, the mind begins to detox. The nervous system unwinds. The soul finally has room to speak. But most people panic in this stage. They mislabel the sacred cocoon as a failure to thrive. And so they miss the gold. Because here's the truth Jung knew. Before the self can expand, it must contract. Just like the breath. Just like the universe itself. Isolation is that divine contraction. A phase of inner winter where old beliefs die, so something eternal can be born. And when you embrace this solitude, not as exile but as sacred space, you unlock the first gate to real transformation. Carl Jung introduced a concept so powerful, it still echoes through modern psychology and spirituality alike: the shadow. It's not evil, but it is invisible. It's everything you were taught to hide, deny, suppress, or reject about yourself. Anger, desire, sensitivity, power, even your divine gifts. And as this hidden reservoir grows, it begins to act beneath the surface, influencing your choices, your moods, and yes, even your need for isolation. You didn't consciously choose to step back from others. The shadow did. It's the part of you that got tired of playing a role. It needed space to breathe, without judgment, without masks. And so, without fully realizing it, you manifested a life situation that pushed you into solitude, not to punish you, but to show you yourself. This is the medicine of the shadow. It brings you back to your forgotten truth through discomfort, reflection, and inner excavation. Most people think of the shadow as only dark, as if it's filled with shameful secrets and ugly truths. But that's a misconception. The shadow also holds your power, your creativity, your intuition, your fire, the things you were told were too much or not enough. And in the silence of solitude, those parts finally begin to speak. That strange restlessness you feel, that's not boredom. That's your shadow knocking on the walls of your awareness, asking to be integrated. Jung warned that what we don't make conscious will appear as fate. In other words, if we don't face our inner fragmentation willingly, life will orchestrate circumstances to force us to. Isolation is one of those orchestrations. It strips away distractions so you can't avoid the mirror. The shadow uses solitude as a sacred strategy to pull you inward, so you can see what's been living beneath your surface this whole time. And here's the cosmic twist. Once you stop fearing your shadow and start listening to it, everything changes. You reclaim your power. Your voice strengthens, your energy clarifies. You no longer need to hide because the parts you feared are now allies. That's when solitude becomes a sanctuary, not a sentence. A realm of integration, where all your fragments begin to merge into one radiant whole. Across every mystical tradition, there is a figure who retreats from the world, not out of fear, but out of purpose. In tarot, he's called the Hermit. In the East, he's a wandering monk. In ancient Egypt, a priest of Thoth. And in Jungian terms, this is the archetype of the wise one, the sacred loner whose solitude is not loneliness but initiation. If you've manifested isolation, this archetype may be activating within you. The hermit's path isn't accidental, it's designed by the soul. It begins with a withdrawal from society, but not as a rejection. It's a turning inward to seek truth that the outer world can't offer. Jung believed archetypes live within the collective unconscious, surfacing when the psyche needs them most. So when the hermit stirs within, it's a signal. Your soul is ready to learn from stillness, to walk the terrain of the unseen, to embrace the inner wilderness. Unlike society's view of solitude as something to escape, the hermit archetype values it as essential. He carries a lantern in the dark, symbolizing inner light found only through self-reflection. That lantern is not lit by external validation. It is kindled by presence, by facing your thoughts, your fears, your longings. And in doing so, you begin to discover a quiet power within that no crowd could ever give you. But beware, the hermit's path can be misinterpreted. Some think it means total withdrawal or spiritual bypassing, but true hermitage isn't escapism, it's devotion. It's entering the silence with courage and emerging with vision. Jung saw this as part of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole by meeting their archetypes, integrating their shadow, and embodying their soul essence. So if you've been feeling called to be alone, to step back, to retreat, don't rush to fix it. You may not be breaking down. You may be being initiated into wisdom, into self-sovereignty, into spiritual power. The hermit doesn't just walk away, he walks deeper, and when he returns, the world doesn't recognize him, because he now walks with the fire of inner knowing. When your soul begins to evolve, your energy does too. Old patterns, relationships, habits, even environments begin to feel heavy, out of sync, almost like they don't fit anymore. And that's because they don't. You're no longer vibrating at the same frequency. Isolation isn't just emotional, it's energetic. Your field is undergoing a detox. And like any true cleansing process, it requires space, silence, and separation. Carl Jung may not have used the term vibration, but he deeply understood that unconscious energies shape our lives. When we carry the unresolved beliefs, traumas, and emotional imprints of others, our authentic self gets buried. So the soul intervenes. It begins pulling you away from the noise, not out of judgment, but out of protection. Isolation becomes the buffer zone where you can finally feel your own vibration without interference. This energetic detox often feels like a sudden disinterest in socializing, working, or even explaining yourself. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you're detaching from everything that isn't aligned with your next level of being. Friends may fall away, desires may shift. The things that once excited you may feel numb. That's okay, you're not losing yourself, you're shedding what's not truly you. This phase can be disorienting, like standing in an empty room after years of clutter. But emptiness is sacred. In yogic traditions, it's called shunyata, the fertile void. In quantum physics, it's the 0-point field. It's the stillness before creation, and this detox is your entry into that sacred emptiness. The more you let go, the more clearly your soul's signal can come through. Eventually, clarity emerges, your body feels lighter, your intuition sharpens, you begin to attract people and experiences that match your upgraded frequency. But none of this happens without first detaching from the outdated. Isolation, in this light, isn't a retreat from life. It's a return to energetic integrity. It's the soul saying, before we go forward, let's clean house. When the world goes quiet, something unexpected begins to speak. Patterns emerge, signs become sharper. You start noticing numbers repeating, dreams becoming vivid, or certain songs playing at just the right moment. These aren't coincidences, they're synchronicities. And Jung believed these meaningful coincidences were the language of the unconscious, or more precisely, the language of the universe itself. Jung defined synchronicity as a bridge between the inner and outer world, a psychic event that aligns with an external one, without logical cause, yet full of profound meaning. And these moments tend to increase in periods of solitude. Why? Because your mind is no longer distracted by the noise of routine and social roles. You become attuned to the subtle field, the realm where thought, energy, and reality begin to overlap. In isolation, your awareness heightens. You're no longer scanning for approval or reacting to external drama. You start tuning into the deeper currents, emotional undercurrents, intuitive hits, gut feelings. This is where the universe begins to reflect you with surgical precision. Every encounter, delay, conversation, or cancellation seems orchestrated, not by accident, but by alignment. Most people miss these signals because they're too busy filling the silence. But silence is the signal. It's the blank canvas that allows the universe to paint clearly. In this stillness, you're not just alone, you are in dialogue with existence itself. And this is where profound insights emerge. You begin to realize that life isn't random. It's responsive, intelligent, interactive, and you are a co-creator in that dance. So if you find yourself alone and suddenly surrounded by strange coincidences, don't dismiss them. You're not going crazy. You're waking up. The universe is speaking to you in a language beyond words, through numbers, dreams, memories, glitches, and perfectly timed whispers. And when you listen deeply, you begin to co-create consciously, guided not by fear, but by resonance. Carl Jung believed that the highest purpose of a human life wasn't happiness, success, or even healing. It was individuation, a sacred psychological process where the fragmented self becomes whole, where the persona, the mask we wear in public, fades, and the true self begins to emerge. And guess what? This process almost always requires a period of isolation, because who you are becoming cannot be born in the same room where the false self was applauded. Individuation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath conditioning, trauma, and cultural scripting. It involves facing the shadow, integrating the archetypes, listening to dreams, decoding symbols, and attuning to your soul's quiet voice. It's a journey inward so powerful that your external world often falls away. not as punishment but as sacred subtraction. In solitude, the soul has the space to activate this inner work. You're no longer performing, you're no longer adapting, and that's when the deeper layers of self begin to rise. Childhood wounds come to the surface, not to hurt you, but to be seen. Patterns of fear, sabotage, and longing reveal themselves, not to shame you, but to liberate you. This is the true alchemy of individuation, turning your pain into presence. Jung warned that individuation is not comfortable. It is often messy, non-linear, and painful, because it requires dismantling who you thought you were to uncover who you really are. But in that breaking, you also begin to spark. You reclaim your intuition. You hear your own thoughts. You start to feel guided, not by others, but by something ancient and intimate within. Isolation then becomes the womb of rebirth, not a place of lack, but of potential. In this space, your ego softens, your spirit awakens, and the many masks you wore fall away. You are no longer just a personality. You are a self, whole, multi-dimensional, integrated. And when individuation completes a cycle, you re-enter the world, not as a seeker, but as one who sees. There's a sacred moment in isolation when the silence feels like a void. At first it terrifies the mind. It craves distraction, stimulation, anything to avoid the stillness. But if you stay with it, truly stay, you begin to discover that this emptiness isn't a curse. It's an alchemical crucible, a transformative space where ego dissolves and soul reclaims its throne. This is where inner power is born. In mystical traditions, emptiness is not seen as lack. It is revered as potential. It is the place before form, the canvas before the painting, the breath before creation. Jung understood this through his deep studies of alchemy. He knew that transformation begins in nigredo, the blackening phase, the void, the spiritual darkness. But this darkness isn't bad, it's fertile. It softens everything false so something real can emerge. In the quiet of isolation, old identities start to decay. You may feel like you're losing yourself, but what you're actually losing is the version of you built for survival, not expression. And as that scaffolding collapses, energy returns to its source. Your attention, your will, your life force, no longer scattered, now becomes focused, intentional, magnetic. And that's when you start to feel something ancient rising, your inner fire. This fire isn't loud. It's not ego-driven. It's calm, rooted. It feels like a knowing deep in your bones, that no matter what happens outside, something eternal lives inside you. This is the essence of spiritual sovereignty. The realization that your power does not depend on approval, audience, or external structure. It comes from the self, cultivated in the void and expressed in the world. So when you sit in your own emptiness and stop resisting it, you unlock the deepest magic of all, creation from wholeness. Not from lack, not from need, but from fullness within. This is the alchemy of isolation, turning silence into wisdom, void into vision, and loneliness into the birthplace of a radiant new self. There comes a moment, often quietly and without warning, when the cocoon begins to crack. Not because you force it, but because you've outgrown it. The silence has served its purpose, the darkness has given its gift, and something inside begins to whisper, it's time. Time to re-enter the world, not as who you were, but as who you've become. This is the sacred re-emergence, the final stage of the soul's solitary journey. But this return is delicate. It doesn't mean rushing back into old circles or repeating familiar rhythms. It means moving with intention, choosing with discernment. The re-emerged self isn't hungry for attention or validation. It radiates from within. You've touched something eternal in the quiet, and now you carry it with you. Carl Jung would call this the individuated self, one who is no longer fragmented but aligned, rooted, whole. This new version of you speaks less but means more, loves deeper but with stronger boundaries, engages with the world but doesn't lose itself in it. That's because the isolation revealed your essence. You've seen your shadow and made peace with it. You've remembered your gifts. You've reclaimed your energy. And now, when you walk into a room, you don't seek to fit in. You shift the frequency simply by being. Re-emergence also brings a sacred responsibility, not to preach, but to embody, to be a living signal for others who are still lost in the noise. Your presence becomes a transmission. Your actions become medicine. Your authenticity becomes a ripple in the collective field. Jung knew that the individuated person becomes a stabilizing force, not by controlling others, but by being fully themselves. So if you've been in isolation and feel the stirrings of return, trust that you are not who you once were. You are now a carrier of deep inner knowledge, and the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more presence. You went inward not to disappear, but to transform. And now you return, not as an echo of the past, but as the embodiment of everything your solitude awakened. You didn't stumble into solitude by accident. Your soul called it forth, because it knew that something deeper needed to emerge. Not the version of you shaped by the world, but the one whispered by eternity. Carl Jung reminded us that wholeness is not achieved by denying the darkness, but by embracing it. And in the silence of your isolation, you've done just that. You've listened to the unspoken, faced the forgotten, and remembered the sacred within. This isn't the end of your journey, it's the rebirth of your truth. So if you've ever felt misunderstood, unseen, or alone, know this. Your isolation was never about exile. It was about initiation. You are not who you were, and the world needs who you've become. If this awakened something in you, give this video a like and subscribe to the Cosmic Awakening channel. Because here, we don't just talk about transformation, we live it.